In Venezuela, the second day of peace talks between the Colombian government and the National Liberation Army continues. Peru's political crisis spreads to international relations. President Pedro Castillo thanked Mexico for its support following Congress' refusal to prevent his participation in the Pacific Alliance Summit. As part of his international tour, the president of Cuba, Miguel Diaz-Canel, bid farewell to his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, after several meetings to assess comprehensive cooperation to confront Western sanctions. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. Delegates from the Colombian government and the National Liberation Army, the ELN, the insurgency advanced in the peace talks that resumed in Caracas this Monday. For the second consecutive day, the delegations headed by the High Commissioner for Peace, Iván Danilo Rueda, and the head of the peace delegation of the ELN, Pablo Beltrán, are holding talks for peace in Colombia. For this day, the parties are accompanied by representatives of the Colombian political life, as well as several peace guarantors, among them representatives of Norway, Cuba, and Venezuela. It is hoped that at the end of the rounds of dialogue in the Latin American nation, new spaces for meeting and solution to the internal conflicts in Colombia will be formulated. Aureliano Carbonell, a member of the ELN peace delegation, said that after the first round of talks, those present have positive expectations about the process.
It has been something positive. We have positive expectations, and if you look at the joint declaration that was signed yesterday between the government and the ELN delegation, it marks a route, it marks a course. It sends a positive message that we're going to make maximum efforts to advance in the changes in Colombia and therefore in peace for Colombia.
In Brazil, the Liberal Party of Jair Bolsonaro asked the Superior Electoral Court to annul the votes of the electronic ballot boxes used in the last presidential elections. In this context, the outgoing president's party insists that the machines are old, which, in its opinion, casts doubt on the reliability of the electoral process, despite the fact that the court has already found otherwise. The complaint of the Liberal Party covers 279,000 ballot boxes used in the second round. In this regard, the Minister of the Supreme Court and the President of the Superior Electoral Tribunal, Alexandre de Moraes, urged Bolsonaro's party to present within 24 hours the audit used to allege the annulment of the votes. The president of Peru, Pedro Castillo, thanked Mexico for its support in the face of the Congress' refusal to prevent his participation in the Pacific Alliance Summit. The head of the state indicated that assuming the pro-tempore presidency of the Pacific Alliance is a commitment to promote the advancement of the countries of the region. Likewise, Castillo said that he will help the Andean nation in its growth for the benefit of the citizens and other members of the alliance. In this context, President Castillo expressed his deep appreciation for the support provided by his Mexican counterpart, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. In this same context, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador confirmed the suspension of the Pacific Alliance Summit after the Peruvian Congress did not authorize President Pedro Castillo to travel to Mexico City. López Obrador informed that the members of the Pacific Alliance will try to hold the summit in Peru in the first week of December after the situation that the country is going through. The president confirmed the visit of the presidents of Chile, Colombia, and Ecuador, who are seeking to join the trade bloc. He also announced that next November 28th, he will meet with the president of Costa Rica, Rodrigo Chávez, and the president of Honduras, Xiomara Castro.
Se suspendió la reunión de la Alianza del Pacífico porque no le permitieron al presidente de Perú asistir y a él le corresponde la presidencia, aquí la iba a recibir y estamos explorando la posibilidad de hacer un acto en Perú o tomar una decisión consultando a los miembros de la Alianza del Pacífico. Estamos en eso. Es probable el que podamos ir a hacer la reunión allá en diciembre, la primera semana de diciembre.
On Tuesday, Peru's Constitutional Court overturned the process opened by the Congress Subcommittee of Constitutional Accusations against President Pedro Castillo for alleged treason. According to local media, the ruling states that the annulment was issued because the agreement against Castillo violates the right to due motivation in parliamentary proceedings. The court's decision comes amidst the visit of a high-level delegation of the Organization of American States to Peru following the implementation of the democratic charter requested by Castillo weeks ago in an effort to address the governance crisis and the impeachment attempts against him. Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Tuesday, the president of Cuba, Miguel Diaz-Canel, met with his counterpart, Vladimir Putin, in the Kremlin as part of his official visit to that nation. During the meeting, the Cuban head of state pointed out that both Russia and Cuba are subject to unjust and arbitrary sanctions stemming from the same enemy. Diaz-Canel emphasized that the U.S. empire has also manipulated an important part of the world, mobilizing a battery of sanctions against Moscow. In this context, the Cuban head of state indicated that Washington manipulated the Kremlin's warnings about the aggression maintained by the Kiev regime against the Ukrainian people. In this regard, Putin thanked Diaz-Canel and pointed out that Cuba can count on Russia's cooperation.
The Soviet Union and Russia have always and continue to this day to support the Cuban people in their struggle for independence, sovereignty. We have always stood against any sorts of restriction, embargoes, blockades, and so on. We have always supported Cuba on the international stage, and we see that Cuba takes the same position towards Russia. All this is a result of a traditional friendship that we established by Comrade Fidel Castro.
The Russian head of state highlighted the courage of the Cuban people and the leadership of Commander Fidel Castro in defending Cuba from international isolation.
Fidel and his associates have always selflessly defended the sovereignty of their native country. They did not allow it to be broken by the intervention of mercenaries, sanctions, financial and economic embargoes, attempts at external isolation. They defended the right of Cuba to its own model of development in accordance with national values.
And the Cuban head of state also pointed out that both Russia and Cuba face unjust sanctions and have in the United States a common enemy.
For us, this visit has a profound meaning. First of all, we are doing it when both countries, Russia and Cuba, are subjects to unfair and arbitrary sanctions that continue. And we have a common enemy, the United States of America, an empire that manipulates a large part of our world. For us,
as part of their official agenda, Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel and his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, participated on Tuesday in the inauguration ceremony of a monument to the late Cuban leader Fidel Castro in Moscow. The Russian president also said that Castro is rightly considered one of the most famous and charismatic leaders of the 20th century, a truly legendary personality. And in Kazakhstan, the 19th International Meeting on Syria is underway in the capital Astana, with Turkey, Russia and Iran as guarantor countries for the talks. This two-day meeting started on this Tuesday, November 22nd, and it concluded on its first day of activities, bilateral and trilateral consultations. The plenary session will be held on the second day to announce the final declaration of the meeting. On Tuesday, some heads of delegations are expected to talk to the press to share their views on the issues discussed. The National Institute of Statistics of Spain reported an increase of more than 15% in the price of food during the month of October of this year, a record figure in almost 3 decades. In this context, the cost of living in Europe due to the energy crisis caused by the war in Ukraine has put more than 13 million Spanish people on the brink of poverty, while inflation has further affected the purchasing power of the poorest sectors of society, according to the British NGO Oxfam. This situation has led to an increase in the number of people queuing for food. For its part, the Spanish government has been allocating economic resources to alleviate conditions. However, charitable organizations point out that the measures adopted are not enough, arguing that the so-called hunger queues are already growing throughout the country. And this Tuesday, a rusty fishing boat that lost its steering and had been drifting in the Mediterranean Sea was successfully docked at the Greek island of Crete, after being dramatically rescued during near Gulf force winds. Carrying around 500 migrants, the boat was rescued by a Greek Navy frigate, a tanker, 2 cargo ships and 2 Italian fishing vessels, but were unable to transport the passengers from the vessel due to the bad weather. The shipping minister, Giannis Plakiotakis, said it was not immediately known where the boat had set sail from or what was its intended destination, and he described the rescue efforts as the largest in the Mediterranean in recent years. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. Britain's King Charles III welcomed South African President Cyril Ramaphosa to London on Tuesday as he hosted the first state visit of his reign. The South African head of state, who arrived at the welcome ceremony with the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Catherine, it is in the United Kingdom for 3 days of high-level talks. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak also attended the ceremony, along with Foreign Minister Secretary James Cleverly and Home Secretary Zwela Braverman. And South African President, in his visit to the UK, stressed the importance of the climate fund agreed on at the recent COP27 in Cairo, saying that it should not be seen as a charity but as a compensation. Ramaphosa also calls on the UK to make its voice heard and be example to international organizations to be more inclusive and better respond to the needs of countries with developing economies.
It is compensation for the harm done and the harm yet to be done to people in developing economies as a consequence of the industrialization that wealthy countries have had over many years.
At least 1 person has been killed and 30 wounded when a car bomb exploded in a police compound in southern Thailand. According to Narathiwat Governor Sinan Pongerson, Tuesday's blast came shortly after a suspect drove a car into the police accommodation and abandoned it. The governor also said police were checking security camera footage to identify the suspect. The fatality was a police officer, while the injured included both civilians and officers. Southern Thailand has witnessed a boiling rebellion since 2004 as fighters in the Muslim-majority provinces of Patani, Yala, Narathiwat, and parts of Songkhla battle for a greater autonomy from the state. In Chad, at least 10 soldiers are killed after an attack by militants of the terrorist group Boko Haram near the Nigerian border. According to a presidential spokesperson, the jihadist group attacked an army post in the west of the country, in the Chad Lake region. Following this incident, the transitional government has pledged to double the size of its army in order to meet security challenges, including terrorist threats. The Boko Haram insurgency, which broke out in northeastern Nigeria in 2009, has killed more than 350,000 people and forced millions to flee their homes. Authorities in Mali have banned the activities of all non-governmental organizations financed or supported by France. Transitional Government Prime Minister Colonel Abdoulaye Maïga made the announcement on Monday night on his social media platforms, following the suspension of the development aid granted by France to Mali. The French executive justified its decision, saying the Malian military authorities are using that aid to finance the Wanger Group, which is a group of Russian military specialists. Malian authorities said such allegations are false and that the presence of Russian military collaborators in Mali complies with the terms of a military agreement with Moscow. And now let's review Tuesday's actions at Qatar 2022 World Cup. Saudi Arabia stunned Lionel Messi's Argentina on Tuesday, beating the two-time winners 2-1 in one of the biggest upsets in World Cup history. Salem Al-Dobzari hit a stunning winner to sink the red-hot favorites, bringing the South American side's 36-match unbeaten run to a shuddering halt. The win was fully deserved after Saudi Arabia came from behind after Saleh Al-Sheri cancelled out an early Lionel Messi penalty. Playing a risky high defensive line, the athletic Saudis rode their luck in the first half when the three times Argentina had the ball in the net, only to be denied by an offside call. But in a chaotic start to the second half, the Saudis swarmed all over Lionel Scaloni's team and scored twice as the Arab nation beat the South Americans for the first time in 5 attempts. And actions will continue on Wednesday in football's biggest international event. The first game of the day was a tie between Morocco versus Croatia, 2018's second place. Germany, four-time winner of the tournament, opens Group E against Japan. The squad led by Luis Enrique will debut against Costa Rica on the third game of the day. And finishing actions in Qatar's fourth day will be Belgium against Canada. And just as the hearts of millions of fans live the emotions of the Qatar 2022 World Cup, TeleSUR joins this sporting event with From the Field, a show that brings news, analysis, reviews, and more to our audience. Don't miss it. Our show airs field only on TeleSUR. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.